Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hi guys, welcome to another show. Thank you for subscribing at worldviewmatters.tv. We're growing slowly but surely, and we appreciate every single share on social media. There's how you can subscribe. You'll get a weekly email on Friday morning of the recap from the shows we do that week, and we will not bombard your email inbox. So please, again, a new show, get it out there, and we really appreciate your prayers, your financial support, donations, of course. We're a nonprofit, but sharing and telling people about Worldview Matters really blesses us. Well, we did a pretty good show, I think, with Dr. Jake Jacobs last week, so we had to have him on again. So, Jake, welcome back for part 2.
Shalom, David.
Shalom. So last time we talked a little bit about the land and the layout and some scripture in the Old Testament and a little bit of world history, biblical history when it comes to Israel. The covenant, Abraham, Palestine, things like that. Today, we're going to talk about the propaganda side of things, the media war, and how they've been so successful. And we're going to talk about all these other issues, too, involving the mainstream media and the left, the university system. We have to talk about how it is that college campuses now, there are Jews that are afraid to go to class. In fact, before we get in, I got a great article by Christopher Rufo called Intersectionality Devolves, and you got a book, his brand new book
right here, America's Cultural Revolution, How the Radical Left Conquered Everything.
Yeah.
Chris, it's a brilliant read, by the way.
I quote him a lot, Chris Rufo.
Yes.
But I want to get your take on this sad environment now at the university level where Jewish students are afraid. Some of them are afraid to go to class, and some of them, they are being attacked on college campuses in America. So what are your thoughts on that? How did we get here?
Well, we could
do an hour on that,
well,
I know.
we could. No, we could. When I went to Arizona State, this is back in the 1970s, I can still remember when Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran, yelling death to America and death to the Jews. Well, there are Iranian students at Arizona State that were going on the campus doing those things, and they were attacking Jews. So this is something
in the 70s.
And then this is in the 1970s. Wow. This is not necessarily new. Remember, it was in the University of Heidelberg in Berlin where Nazism flourished through the famous or infamous Professor Heidegger, who was a renowned German scholar and, in essence, adhered to National Socialism. So the university can, in many cases, unfortunately, not live up to what it's supposed to be. An advocate for the teaching of great liberal and conservative thoughts, engaging in dialogue and debating and discussing and learning about life and culture and things related. Yeah. The university has become an indoctrination, brainwashing seedbed. Yeah. That disseminates a hatred towards the Judeo-Christian worldview, towards Christianity, towards Judaism, towards really many things that Western civilization, Christian civilization, has been teaching throughout the centuries. And they have gone, unfortunately, we use the term woke. I call them wokeocrats. They have gone hardcore leftist. As you know, leftism roots goes back into the days of the Tower of Babel, but really the French Revolution, which was an anti-Christian revolution, godless revolution that called for the ending of the Judeo-Christian worldview. And so my point is, you see manifested in not only American universities, but European universities and others around the world.
Didn't it start over in Europe?
It most certainly did.
We haven't talked about the Fabian socialists, for a while. In fact, I don't think I've been on this program that we've gotten to that. Can you share a little bit about that history? Because didn't a lot of them migrate over here in the 1930s?
You're absolutely, well, I mean, that's the Frankfurt School, and there are other schools that came earlier than other individuals that came earlier, but the Frankfurt School, and I was called a Jew hater, an anti-Semite, because I had said something historically accurate. I said what you saw in Germany in the 1920s were a group of Jewish intellectuals who rejected Judaism. They were atheists, and they were looking, in their words, for a utopic worldview that would, in essence, accomplish equality and justice for all. Okay, now
sounds good.
It sounds real good, but the fact
So
of the
does
matter,
socialism.
well, this was the foundation of Marxism and socialism. So it appealed to university students because the rhetoric sounds majestic, when in reality, if you go underneath the rhetoric, you find that it's totalitarian. It actually is anti-life and liberty. So that Frankfurt School, many of them being Jewish, they read Mein Kampf, and they went, uh-oh, we're in trouble. So we're going to go over to America, the most egregious, horrible, oppressive nation in the world, and we're going to go over there and have incredible freedom of speech. We're going to be at Columbia and Madison and Berkeley, and we're going to be able to disseminate these ideas in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and it locked in through Herbert Marcuse and others into the university. It became common core curricula in American universities, and therefore the teachers of the teachers of the teachers are now teaching the Zoomers all this Marxist, socialist, pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic worldview stuff that has poisoned their hearts and their minds.
Now, isn't it fascinating? You just summed up, I believe, very succinctly, that's almost 100 years. Because it's almost, 2030.
The long march through the institutions.
Yeah. And that was Antonio Gramsci, and he, the prison notebooks, he was the Italian Marxist and maniac who...
See, Italian.
Evil,
Sorry.
Hey, there are some good ones. But he was evil, but brilliant by saying this, we'll never take down America militarily. It's going to have to be through the cultural Marxism. So it's the long, progressive march through the major institutions, and they wanted to break down or destroy the wall of Christianity, the Judeo-Christian worldview, and they did it over the decade, over the generations, and they've been successful.
Now that's interesting because Gramsci, this Italian Marxist, this admirer of Karl Marx, by the way, I'd highly recommend Marx and Satan by Richard Wurmbrand, who I had the honor of meeting in Bible college back in the 80s.
Wow, Voice of the Martyrs.
He suffered for years. Remember, he wrote The Tortured for Christ?
Yep.
And also Paul Kengor of Grove City College, The Devil in Karl Marx.
I've quoted him too, Paul Kengor.
And I had the honor of being able to work with him in Young Americans for Freedom. Brilliant historian.
Wow.
But with Gramsci, he always brought up the fact that Christianity got in the way of their worldview. Christianity was the thing that stopped them from conquering the world for their utopic, which is really dystopic, ideology. And I summarize him as the 4 C's. We're going to destroy America or Judeo-Christian civilization through culture, through the classroom, through curricula, and we're going to infiltrate the churches. Those 4 C's is exactly where we're at now in America. So I'm not surprised when I see these things that are coming out of various so-called Christian denominations in America and around the world. And I'm not surprised when I see it manifested culturally through Hollywood and through various cultural expressions in this nation, social media, etc. And I'm not surprised when you see far too many university professors that are disseminating this balderdash, these lies, this demonic teachings that are so anti-Jewish, anti-Judaism, anti-Judeo-Christian, it's anti-Semitic, it's Jew hate.
And they have been getting away with this for decades and decades. It doesn't seem like there's much accountability there, even if they are hateful or lie. It's like, well, they'll get away with it. I guess they let it slide. But I want to mention this article by Rufo, Intersectionality Devolves. He said, left-wing radicals have long supported the violent decolonization of Israel. And he said some very interesting things in here. For years, left-wing intellectuals have treated intersectionality as an inevitability. The social theory which holds that all oppressed peoples must join together to overthrow their common oppressor has been an essential strategy of the left. And isn't that Marxism on steroids? What's happening? Well, they're saying Israel is the oppressor, but America also, we're an oppressor, the West.
Now, this is interesting because you mentioned intersectionality. Intersectionality, actually, we see here, her name is Kimberly Crenshaw. Now, this is called the Big Red Book.
Okay.
This is a book that's been edited and it forwards by Cornel West, the Marxist running for president, Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell, who was the professor of Barack Obama at Harvard Law School. Kimberly Crenshaw, the creator of the word intersectionality, came with Derek Bell to Madison, Wisconsin. I was there. It was the summer of 1989. They introduced critical race theory.
Wow.
And they call it the Big Red Book because it's named after Mao's Little Red Book. And here's the point in bringing all this up. What they do is they have a structure, a dialectic structure where you have to have a boogeyman, a bad man, an evil person, an evil thing. And the evil thing is either America or Israel, because in essence, we're a republic under God that has its foundation Judeo-Christianity.
Right.
I mean, the presidents were sworn in on the Bible. Thanksgiving proclamations galore. Israel, the land of Israel, the people of Israel, reflecting the reality of Judaism and the birth, the child of Judaism, Christianity, the rabbi Jew, Jesus. And so what you see within this world of Marxism and critical race theory, which I call critical racist theory, is they create an oppressor. They, in essence, they take the literal like teachings of Karl Marx. You know, the haves, the rich, are the oppressors of the have-nots. You know, the proletariat, and they create a new proletariat, the college students, and they create a new bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie are Jews. They're white now, right? They're oppressive whites. The new bourgeoisie are conservative Christians, traditionalists in America and around the world, and therefore they have kind of, how can I say, they've honed Marxism to apply to the world today. Mm-hmm. And that's what people don't recognize. This is an unholy align. Stop and think of it. Marxism is supposedly doesn't believe in God. Islam, the holy one, they believe in Allah manifested through the prophet Muhammad. But
strange bedfellows.
Strange bedfellows. But think of what they are. These are evil Weltanschauungs. These are evil worldviews. That's why I love the name of your show, Worldview Matters. Yep. This matters for us to understand the nature of the beast.
Yes.
This is demonic.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got to take a break. And when we come back, a little bit more from that article by Chris Rufo, he starts talking about BLM, which I always call the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, Marxist-driven, anti-family, anti-God. We'll talk about that with Dr. Jacobs, and we'll talk about the media and how they are complicit in this too. They don't get a pass. Next on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbinger's Daily, world news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
So before we get back into this, Jake wrote a book called Mob Rule. And what year did that come out, Jake?
2020, during the whole mob rule situation with Black 2020.
Was it 2020?
2020. Remember?
Okay.
Yeah, that's when the when the riots happened. Would have been May when George Floyd and all that happened in Minneapolis. Right. I was in Phoenix, and the riots happened in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I said to my wife, I've got to write this book, Mob Rule. And it's called Unmasking the Radical Leftists at Our Doorstep, the subtitle, because I wanted people to know the Marxist nature of Black Lives Matter, the Marxist nature of Antifa, and all these hardcore leftists. And their common denominator, by the way, for all these hardcore leftists was their hatred of Jesus, their hatred of Christianity, their hatred of the Judeo-Christian worldview.
That brought together all the radicals. And I remember, if we can go back, I don't want to get too far off topic here, but just for a minute, 2010, when the leftists were boycotting or trying to recall Scott Walker, the governor in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes.
And the Socialist USA, Socialist Party of America was there. They're all raising the communist fists, and that was the mob there in 2010. So we saw a little taste of it in Madison, but in 2020, what happened? supposedly it was justified because of what happened with George Floyd. That was just off the charts evil, what happened after that.
Of course it was. And by the way, I think it's interesting to note once again that there was this strong vein of Jew hate, a strong vein of death to America, death to Israel going on within, the hoi polloi, within the leadership of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Leftism, by its very nature, it goes back to the Tower of Babel. It goes back to the French Revolution, as I've mentioned earlier. And what we need to recognize is that it is hell-bent on destroying the heavenly values of what Jesus Christ and the Judeo-Christian worldview is about. By the way, he's showing the book that I wrote in 2012 based upon what I experienced down in Madison when I defended Governor Walker. Look at the subtitle, The Cultural and Political War to Destroy Our Republic Under God. Though there were the Marxists, there were the socialists, there was Antifa types. Yep. There were actually antecedents to Black Lives Matter that were in Madison at that time.
Wow. So this has been going on for quite some time, and you've been writing about it, calling it out. I got this article from Chris Rufo. I want to get your take on it because he's talking about the foot soldiers of intersectionality, Black Lives Matter, the Democrat Socialists of America, DSA, the academic, quote, decolonization movement. And by the way, after Israel was attacked, Black Lives Matter said, all right, pro-Palestine. Yeah, we'll ride that train. This is really bizarre, really interesting. LGBTQ, which Muslim countries, they'll throw them off. They'll kill homosexuals. They'll throw them off the roof. But they're out there with the BLM. This is just really bizarre. It has to be demonic. It's spiritually.
It's schizophrenic. It is that too. It really. I mean, when you think of it, because you can be sitting there holding up a sign saying "Queers for Palestine" or "Lesbians for Palestine" or whatever signs I've been seeing all over the country and all over Europe and all over the world, and you're thinking to yourself, "Let me get this straight. If they were living in Gaza, their heads would be cut off. They would be decimated. They would be killed. There's an incongruency within their worldview, within their thinking. Their thinking is predicated upon feelings of the moment. This is what wokeism is, the anything goesism of wokeism. They fall for the rhetoric of social justice. There's an organization, Social Justice for Palestine, which, by the way, is backed by Iran and is connected to Hezbollah and Hamas.
Of course.
And they have infiltrated American universities. You see it at Columbia. You see it at New York University, down in Madison and in Berkeley, and all across Arizona State, I'm ashamed to say. These organizations disseminate this propaganda, and our young people, the Zoomer generation, I'm a boomer, so I call them the Zoomers, right? These young kids, they're buying it. They're drinking the poison.
Well, they're being bombarded. It's not just a subtle little teachings here. They're being bombarded, and it's not just the talking points. They're being taught this on a deeper level, like this, and history has been completely rewritten. But if you look at polls, especially this one that came out, a Harris poll, strong majorities of Americans do support Israel, and they're against Hamas. And you would never know this, but there's a generational divide here, Jake. I want to mention that. So I want to get your take. 84% of voters support Israel over Hamas, and 88% believe Israel has a right to respond militarily against Hamas. But if you look at the
demographics,
that's what age is that? Oh, come on.
What we're talking, the Zoomers are what, like 18 right now, or 16 to 24?
Okay, let's talk about that age range. 18 to 24-year-olds, 48% say they side more with Hamas.
Education,
like, really?
Education,
and war. So the views are separated by how old you are, and you're right. The education, the younger people, that's what they know. That's what they've been taught.
Look, this hangs in my office. Marxism in U.S. classrooms.
What year?
U.S. 1982.
82?
1982. Okay, I was in Bible college after Arizona State. I went to Bible college, shaping my worldview that matters. And in that article was Howard Zinn. You've talked about Howard Zinn before. Sorry about this. I got to get the camera.
That's okay.
But this book came out in 1980, 81. This was the #1 selling book written by a Marxist. I was supposed to use it in the high school. It was the #1 book that was used at social studies conventions in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was disseminated all throughout the country. #1 selling book was written by a Marxist, and the Marxists, as you know, have worked with Palestinian organizations, militant Muslim organizations, because they have a common goal. It is the annihilation of not only the Jews, not only death to Israel, but also death to America, death to our republic under God. Christians.
It's the Saturday worshipers, and then they're coming for the Sunday worshipers.
Amen.
Yeah. So there is something I wanted to ask you about before we run out of time. It's going by way too fast. We'll talk about the media a little bit more and how they report recently on the radical Democrats in the House that are anti-Israel. But I want to mention November 1st, Kamala Harris announced a national strategy to combat Islamophobia. You heard that right. Kamala Harris, in the wake of anti-Semitic threats. So here's what she's doing. I'll read the tweet so you can know exactly what they said. Let's see. In a post on X, Twitter X, she said, "Today, at POTUS," meaning the President of the United States, "and I are announcing the country's first national strategy to counter Islamophobia. This action is the latest step forward in our work to combat a surge of hate in America." So the Biden administration says, let's help those that are going against Muslims. So we'll counter Islamophobia. Jake, doesn't this seem odd at this time? I mean, I understand that's their worldview. They're anti-Israel, they're anti-Christian. But to do this now,
this is par for the course.
There's no mistakes. Everything's purposeful. What do you think they're doing?
This is a part of their modus operandi. This is why the nature of leftism, and they've taken over the Democratic Party. You've got the Socialist Squad, Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and Rashid Tlaib. They have been throwing out anti-Jewish, anti-Israel attacks, verbiage since they came into office. Yeah. And nobody seems to care about that. Nobody seems to talk about that. But this is the strategy. The strategy is in the midst of the explosion of Jew hate across the world, across America.
It's never been this
They're
bad.
always the inverters, the perverters of truth, the twisters of reality and truth. They end up accusing us of what they themselves are doing. You and I know that. This happens in 1,000 different categories and current issues in America today. And what's happening is they've decided we're going to take the side of the Muslims, of Hamas, and we're going to say, and by the way, there's no demographic reality to this. They say it's gone up like 37% or whatever the numbers are. There's no substantiated. In fact, the latest FBI reports on this talk about Jew hate, anti-Semitism is exploding in the United States. And it's very interesting, just like the average American, when I travel across this great land and I talk to so many thousands and thousands of Americans who love God, who love our republic under God. They work hard, they pay their taxes. They are the same ones who understand what's going on with Israel, what's going on with these hardcore leftists. Yep. They disdain it just like we do. But the media doesn't cover that. The media doesn't explain that. The media doesn't want us to know what most Americans actually believe and think.
Well, still, it's good to see at least the older generations, and I would say over age 40, that still generally support Israel and understand what's going on, but they're not the ones that get.
But this is why we have shows like yours, and I'm telling your audience, David, if your audience can get these types of shows, Worldview Matters, My One Nation, and Dr. Duke's show from Freedom Project Media, get those out to the younger people so they can start to maybe fix their worldview thinking, their poor worldview thinking, and get an established understanding of truth.
I want to encourage you guys to go to freedomproject.com and look up some of these shows that Dr. Jake Jacobs was just mentioning. The article comes to a close and says, critics questioned the timing of the White House announcement, especially since the anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses reached a boiling point. And so there's always, it's never by mistake when they do something. It's always purposeful. We question the timing, but Yeah, they're evil, and they plan this out. I want to mention what you brought up, the Squad, because Media Research Center, Newsbusters, did a study on this on ABC, CBS, and NBC. Newsbusters surveyed all nighttime newscasts from October 7 to October 22. They were looking for any mention whatsoever of anything that anyone on the Squad, the radical House Democrats, said about Israel or about the war. And out of 525 minutes of reporting on Israel, Palestine, Hamas, the coverage there, zero, nothing, niet, nil, goose egg, nada. No, not even a single second was mentioned. So the media, bottom line, the media covers for the Democrats, and this has gone on. I mean, look at Hunter Biden, Jake.
It's unbelievable.
If you're a liberal Democrat, unfortunately today you're above the law for the most part. But what do you think about the media now? We talked about the universities.
Yeah.
The media, because a lot of people still watch the major networks thinking they're getting a little bit of the news, Jake.
Yeah, theoretically, the media is supposed to be objective. The media is supposed to be sharing various sides. They're supposed to be dealing with dialoguing and discussing and having legitimate debates about legitimate issues. But what the media has, well, look, if you're going to go off to the university, which is woke, and it's leftism, and you're gone to, let's say, Arizona State's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, you know what you're learning.
Yeah.
You're learning leftism. You're learning wokeism.
Yeah.
You become a wokeocrat, and therefore you disseminate that which you learn. Your worldview now has been infiltrated, has been poisoned, and brainwashed to believe this stuff. And therefore now as a journalist, objectivity is out the door.
Well,
and what you now do is you become a propagandist.
Yep,
You become
exactly.
a political left-wing activist and a propagandist.
Just another mouthpiece. I mean, we were doing, by the way, one of the most vicious attacks by the media on any political candidate, I was astounded, was Sarah Palin. When she was running on VP on McCain's ticket,
yep.
I couldn't believe the media just said, I don't care what people think, we hate her, and they just let it all. But back in the 80s, Jake, during the Reagan administration, there were surveys of the mainstream media. We're running out of time already, but they were looking at the worldview of the major anchors at CNN, NBC, MSNBC, the New York Times, and places like that, and they were overwhelmingly supportive of abortion, homosexuality, and you go on down the list. Anything that the Bible would consider sin.
Even
the
back
media
then.
Was socialism to over 60%. When it comes to abortion, I think it was about 90%, even in the late 80s. So now we go, okay, well, we see what side they're on. It's clear to see.
It's come to fruition.
Yeah, but Jake, we are going to have to do this again and bring in your books to be continued. We didn't even get to the 1619 project. Oh, my goodness.
Paisano, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, Jake reads and researches these books, so you don't have to. Anyway, Jake, God bless you, brother. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. God bless you.
Oh, Lord, another great week of guests. Thank you guys again for tuning in, for sharing the podcast. God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.